I want to talk to you a little bit about Shabbos, Chassidic ideas about Shabbos. When I was first on my way in, certain verses in Dovid bothered me. Mikdash Melech, Ir Melucha, the holy place of the king, the city of the kingdom. By the way, that's quite exact. Really, as the Mishnah in Kelim points out, there are 10 levels of Kedusha in Yerushalayim, and they start from the Holy of Holies of the temple and spread out all the way to the city limits. So here it says, Mikdash Melech, Ir Melucha, the holy place of the king, the city of the kingdom. The holy place is the whole city. The whole city has holiness. It's not just a building of what we call the temple. Kumi tzei mitoch ha'afecha. Get up and exit from the overturned, destroyed state. What does that mean? How's it going to happen? Are we referencing here rebuilding the Mikdash? Sounds like it. Rav lach Shabbos be'emes habocha. Which, by the way, as was pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago, Em Chabocha, they say it's the valley of weeping, but Rashi uses the phrase to mean a condition of confusion. Mora Nevuchim of the Rambam, the teacher for the confused. Nevuchim ba'aretz, Paro says the Jewish people are Nevuchim in the land because they're wandering, they're trapped. Trapped is what Rashi says. They're trapped. The sea is trapping them. The mountains are trapping them. They have no way out. This is a valley of entrapment. It's destroyed, and nobody's rebuilding it, and the nations of the world are stopping us from rebuilding it. No, let's rebuild it, and He'll have mercy on you. But you can't rebuild the temple on Shabbos. You can't do it. It's not allowed. So why are we asking in our introduction to Shabbos and our acceptance of Shabbos, why are we asking for something that's not allowed? Same thing with the next, which really refers to the city of Yerushalayim. His na'ari me'afar kama kumi. It's not me'afar kumi, that's wrong. This na'er means to shake off. Shake off the dirt and get up. Dress your garments of glory, my people. Ayad ben Yishai, Beis Alachmi, according via ben Yishai, which is King David. But the Mashiach can't come on Shabbos. He's not coming on Shabbos, the Gemara tells us. So what are we singing about? Let's see, was there another one? So I asked this of my Rebbe's brother, Zachariban Bracha, what does it mean? And he said the following: there are 3 dimensions of existence, not the 3 that you're familiar with, besides you would think it was 4. The 3 dimensions of existence are time, space, and soul. That covers Einstein, right? Time, space, and soul. Each of the dimensions has a central point of holiness. In time, it's Shabbos. In soul, it's the Jewish people. And in space, is the temple, the city of Jerusalem. These 3 foci of holiness interact with one another. Were we to have all 3, it's called synergy. It's not just 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, it's 1 + 1 + 1 is 1,000. Because they interact, they reinforce one another. And if you don't have them, you don't get that reinforcement. You don't get that synergy. Okay, Now, usually during the week, we have only one. When Shabbos comes, we have two. We have 2 out of 3. When you have 2 out of 3, the consciousness of the third missing becomes much greater. We're almost there. We have, 67%. So you feel the missing of the third element much more deeply. And here, we're not under no illusions. We're not thinking that in the next 24 hours we're going to build a temple. But we're longing for the temple. And we can't suppress that longing. So it was put into words in this poem that we used to greet Shabbos with. So the fact that you have 2 out of 3 emphasizes the fact that the one that's missing, and of course that means when you have 1 plus 1, 1 plus 1 is 2. Whereas 1 plus 1 plus 1 would have been 1,000. So there's a gigantic loss here. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, the Sfas Emes, if you look in the Divrei Torah of the Sfas Emes, which are divided by Shabbos, in other words, he said them on Shabbos and were collected, almost every idea that he expresses, no matter about what subject, ends off with a comment about Shabbos, and usually the comment is, this and this is what's needed, and this is what's missing, and these are the pieces that we have yet to develop, but because we have Shabbos, we are satisfied. In some way, Shabbos makes up for the thing that we're missing. So now, it seems like we're facing a contradiction, almost a paradox. We're being told on the one hand that because on Shabbos you have 2 out of 3, you miss the third more. And then we're being told that on Shabbos itself compensates for the missing element, which ought to mean you miss it less. So, how do you adjudicate these 2 ideas? The truth is that there are expressions of this type of tension in other areas as well, in particular about the Beis HaMikdash, about the temple. There are 2 types of commemorations of the temple that we have in our literature. My Rabbi Zatzal talked about this, even wrote an article on it. One type, which people are very familiar with, is called Zecher LeChurban, commemorating the destruction of the temple. And that is expressed in many customs. For example, if you build a house for Jews, the first owner and first resident is going to be a Jew, then there's a mitzvah in the Shulchan Aruch that you leave a square of wall unfinished. Usually it's opposite the door to which you enter the house. So as if to say, we're in an unfinished state, an imperfect state, I can't finish my home. People sometimes walk into a Jewish house, they don't see it, they don't know why. That's because it wasn't built for them, it was built for non-Jews, and bought from non-Jews. In that case, the mitzvah doesn't apply. But if you're building it, you have to put it there. And it indicates as part of mourning for the destruction of the temple. At a wedding, you smash a glass to hold back, to a certain extent, the rejoicing because of the destruction of the temple. Some have the custom of putting ashes on the forehead of the groom at a wedding, again, to indicate the destruction. There are 5 fast days per year, in which we commemorate the destruction of the temple. So there's a lot of ideas that recall the temple in terms of mourning for its destruction. That's called Zecher LeChurban, commemorating the destruction. But then there's another category called Zecher LeMikdash, commemorating the Mikdash itself. And that's where you do something now because it was done in the Mikdash. So at the Cedar, you have the Hillel sandwich. You eat matzah, you eat moror, and they say, and by the way, Hillel used to eat the matzah moror together and the Paschal sacrifice, the meat also, in a sandwich. And we then eat more matzah and more moror in a sandwich to recall the way Hillel did it. Why are we doing that? Are we introducing into the night of the Seder a little bit of mourning for destruction? Absolutely not. The message here is the opposite. That the temple isn't totally missing. It isn't totally absent. So we can do something that was done then because its remaining presence in the world enables us to connect with the reality of the temple in this way. Same thing is true in Sukkot when we take the Lulav and Esrog 6 days, not Shabbos, but every other day, throughout the world. That was the mitzvah only in the temple. Everywhere else in the world it was only 1 day. The verses are explicit on that matter. But we were told, since the destruction of the temple, take it everywhere, rabbinically, everywhere in the world, Zecher Mikdash, to remember what was done in the Mikdash, meaning, again, that something of the Mikdash is still available, still alive, and we can connect to that. We count the days between Pesach and Shavuos, 49 days. The verse which establishes that rule says you should do it the day after we bring a certain sacrifice to the temple. Well, you are surely aware that we're not bringing any sacrifice to the temple at all right now. So some say that mitzvah doesn't apply. It's supposed to start the day after you bring that sacrifice. We're not bringing that sacrifice. And some say the fact that we count is only rabbinic. It's rabbinic because that's what they did, and the rabbi said we can still connect to that idea in that way. Now, no one has the illusion that what we are doing now equals what was done then. But on the other hand, it does have, in spiritual terms, a connection to something that's still alive. That's the second expression as far as the temple is concerned. With respect to the sacrifices, you have a similar idea. The Gemara says, if you do something that would require you to bring a sacrifice, learn the verses that describe the sacrifice, and by learning the verses, it's as if you brought the sacrifice. Now, as is often the case with rabbinic terminology, if you read it like an 11-year-old using your dictionary, you're not going to get it. It's a word in a whole literature, and it has a meaning that's defined by the context. It's a little bit like if you read a contract, let's say in American law, and people are contracting to mutual obligations, they have a phraseology, party of the first part, and party of the second part, and party of the third part, and you think, oh, these guys are from Los Angeles, they're partying all the time. No, that's not what party means. It just means designated person. So here, when the Torah tells you that you should read the verses that refer to this sacrifice and you have satisfied your obligation, it means you're doing the maximum that can be done now when we don't have a temple. But let's say you do something on Monday, and that thing that you do on Monday requires a sacrifice, so you're very diligent, and right after you do it, you take out the Chumash, and you read the verses that refer to the sacrifice, and Monday noon the temple's rebuilt. Monday afternoon you have to bring the sacrifice. Didn't really completely fulfill the requirement of the sacrifice, but it did do what was available to you. So at least you get credit for sensitivity, you get credit for commitment, you get credit for seriousness and understanding the nature of what you've done and what it needs. All those things are spiritually valuable. So we have this double attitude towards an item. In one case, we talked about Shabbos, Shabbos vis-a-vis the temple, that on the one hand it's missing, and we register the fact that it's missing, and on the other hand, we take advantage of what's available from it. I'll give you perhaps an example from history, which I personally lived through. When I first came to Eretz Israel in 1964, to make a call home to the United States meant arranging it a week in advance with an international operator. And then at the designated time, the designated day, you called up the operator and you stayed on the phone for 20 minutes. When they called up the other person in America, they assessed that it was really the right person, and then the payments were made and everything else, and then you got to talk. Today, you want to call America, pick it up and dial. Right? So you have something which is a much better replacement. If you use Skype or Zoom, you can even see the person, interact with the person, so the 6,000 miles is overcome in a much more dramatic way. It's still not like being together with the other person. There's still a gigantic gap between the two, but the gap is less. It gives you something more of the reality that's available to you. So this is a general attitude. That means when you go into Shabbos, there's a sort of complex development of emotions and ideas. That on the one hand, you have to think in terms of what you're missing, and on the other hand, you have to think in terms of what you have. This is an idea that applies in broader terms as well. Let's take the world to come. Olam haba. We are told by our sources that no human being has understanding of what Olam haba is like. I'll give you an example of what it means, lack of understanding. I don't know if this applies to you or it doesn't. If it doesn't apply to you, that's good. You'll understand the example better. If it does apply to you, you at least know what people talk about. Let's take a 6-year-old. What's beautiful? What's pleasurable? What's thrilling? What's inspiring to him? Well, first of all, I suppose, many interactions with his parents, hopefully, and friendships, and basic physical pleasures. But the pleasure of a beautiful mathematical proof, he's not going to have that. Not only does he have it, you couldn't explain it to him. Now, for many adults, you can't explain it to them either. If you don't have that experience, but you've heard people talk about it. That's a beautiful proof, and that's a clumsy, ugly, just does the job. Gets me the theorem, but gives me no insight, no understanding, nothing fits together. Just rattle along, step by step by step. Get to the end and say, "Oh, okay, I can't deny it," but it gives no insight. I've done some mathematics, so I've experienced it directly. You understand you can't teach that to a 6-year-old unless he's some kind of gigantic genius. It's just not within his capacity to understand. But you also know that if he will learn mathematics and gain some understanding for it, he'll see it himself. So it's not as if the capacity isn't there, it's just that the tools needed to activate the capacity haven't been absorbed yet. Or let's take the pleasure of Shakespeare. To a child who speaks English at the age of 6, we know that unless he's got some disability, if he has normal intelligence, normal ability, he can understand at least some of it. And it would be thrilling to him, just that he needs to have the absorption of the idea. So it isn't as if the world to come is something which is so different, so categorically out of our reality that we'd have to become different people to know that, to experience the enjoyment. There are certain developmental stages we have to go through and a transition to a different relationship between the soul and the body so that we can enjoy it. When the Gemara says, Nehene miziv hashchina, they're enjoying the shine, the radiance of God's presence, it isn't as if the word enjoyment there is a code word for calisthenics, or a code word for swimming the English Channel, or it means enjoyment. But it means enjoyment of something on a level that your present reality doesn't give you access to. There's a temptation often to treat the words in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the tradition, as if they were code words. Who knows what pleasure means to God? Who knows what obligation means to God? Who knows what reward means to God? Maybe pleasure to God means mushrooms, or it means collapsing black holes, or who knows what it means to God? That's unacceptable, because all these texts were created as communication between God and us. It won't do to say, well, this all God's creation, and therefore we don't know what it means, but He gave it to us for what? To put in the bookcase? To carry around? He gave it to us to communicate to us. So these words have to have some meaning for us. So, just like when you say to a child, someday when you grow up, maybe you'll experience this. You the child I'm talking to now, you have to become a different person. When I was a kid, when I was in high school, we had an exchange student from what was then called Ceylon, Sri Lanka. He lived with us for 3 months. Came in the winter. We were living in New York, and we took him to an ice skating rink. So you have to imagine, of course, in those days, that country was terribly impoverished. So we approach, and he sees this area, and it's surrounded by a medium-high wall, let's say a waist-high wall. He looks at the people are gliding around, silently gliding around. What is going on here? They're going much too fast, but they're not working hard, they're not running. It's not a roller skating rink, that would be very noisy. No, they're just gliding around. He was like mesmerized. What could that be? And then we take him in, and he looks down. Wow, that's ice! How are they doing that? And then he looks on the feet, and he sees this blade. This is brand new to him. So there are things which are outside of your experience. That it took him a half hour to put them on, and get the hang of it. Now the things that are further, but that's not the olam haba. The world to come is outside of our present experience and grasp. But then the tradition tells us Shabbos is me'ein olam haba. Shabbos is of the same type, same category as the world to come. Oh. So, even though Olam Haba, full strength, isn't available to us, there's something which relates to it in a common way. Let's see. In what way would it relate? I use the following example to communicate the general structure here. Suppose you wanted to explain to a fish what fire is. Well, you got a problem, you see, because he's in water where you can't burn something. But you might heat the water. Just heat it. And then tell him, fire something like that. Okay, now equip the fish with an aqualung, so he can gurgle the water as he walks on land, and let him walk around and see if he can identify fire. He's not going to think ice is fire. He's not going to think a table is fire. He comes across real fire, feeling the warmth. He'll say, I felt that. That's familiar. So he could do a pretty good job identifying fire. Now it's true, an electric stove isn't fire, so therefore he'll make mistakes. He will make some mistakes, but almost everything that he comes across he'll classify correctly. In a similar sense, Shabbos gives us an experience which isn't Olam Haba itself, but when we get to Olam Haba, we'll look back and say, yeah, Shabbos did have some of those features. So again, we're facing this mixed reality where on the one hand you don't have X, on the other hand you have something of X, and that something has to be both appreciated for what it gives you and appreciated in terms of its limitations. So let's see, how is Shabbos like Olam Haba? Well, the one biggest analogy which is brought in this forum is like a sea voyage. A sea voyage in those days. You get on the ship, you have exactly what you took with you. That's it. Nothing else. No helicopter's going to come and give a drop for new stuff. What you prepare for the voyage is what you have for the voyage. No more. Same thing is true for Shabbos, as you know well. You can't cook anything on Shabbos. You can't do anything that would have a significant and useful physical effect. You can't fix a chair. You can't turn lights on and off. So Shabbos requires preparation, and when you get there, all you can do is use what you prepared. The world to come is like that also. This is the world in which you prepare. All the opportunities you have here will create differences in the way in which your world to come functions. But once you die, it's over. At that point, you made it, and that's what you have for eternity. There are certain variations on it, but that's the general idea. So that very much they have in common. There's something else also that they have in common. Cedar, another Chassidic commentator, points out that the holidays and Shabbos have something in common, but the way they have it is different. All of the holidays involve presence in the temple. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm trained in mathematics, mathematical logic. That was my subject that I taught. So I choose my words with care. And I stand by my words. If my words are wrong, then I'm wrong. I'm not going to tell you I meant something else. I said they have something in common, which involves involves presence in the temple. That's very vague, and I mean it to be vague. So, for 3 of the holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, there's a mitzvah to go to the temple. It's a pilgrimage holiday. And you physically go and present yourself in the temple. Rosh Hashanah, when you blow the shofar, it mustn't be gilded with gold in a certain way. And the reason is because when you blow the shofar, says the Gemara, it's as if you're standing in the Holy of Holies. You're virtually there. That word comes in handy over the last 20 years. You're virtually there, and gold can't be used in the service in the Holy of Holies because of a certain problem. And since you're virtually there, don't put gold. Yom Kippur, it says, purify yourselves before God. L'fnei Hashem titharu. So it sounds like you're standing before God. That's what it says. And again says it's if you're there in the temple. So the 5 major holidays, 3 of them have actual physical transportation to the temple. 2 of them have a virtual presence in the temple. Now, says the Pri Tzaddik, Shabbos also has a special connection with God, but not via your transporting yourself really or virtually to the temple. No. The verse about Shabbos says, Shabbosi b'chol moshosechem. It's Shabbos in all of your dwelling places. The message there is not that you go to God, but God comes to you, where you are. The meeting place is where you are, not going to his place for the meeting. That's very dramatic. All of them, all the holidays and Shabbos, celebrate together a special connection with God, but it's a different kind of connection. There's a connection which envelops Jews wherever they are. It means it can elevate and deal with the reality that the Jew is living in, even outside the land of Israel. Whereas the holidays require you to go to a very special place to have that meeting. If you aren't in that place, not physically and not virtually, then the meeting doesn't take place. So again, I can't go to the temple. I live in New York, I live in Johannesburg, I live in London. And therefore, for whatever reason, I can't be there. Talk about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but the temple is destroyed. Shabbos is the same. Shabbos is the same as it was. And that connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu can be had on Shabbos. Indeed, one of the Rishonim says that just like, and this is what I said to you at the beginning, that just like the temple is a special part of geography, so Shabbos is a special part of time. And if you are under the illusion that time is uniform, we'll have to unlearn that. Time is not uniform. 7 days are not uniform. The 24 hours of Shabbos have a different character from the 24 days. If it doesn't show on your clock, it's because you have a physical clock that doesn't show the spiritual reality. So on Shabbos, you have that opportunity for a meeting, which is both the same and guaranteed, but you know that the other type of meeting, the type of meeting that you have in the temple, that's not available to you. And that's another way to see what the Rebbe's brother told me about L'Chadoidi, that you know that the temple would have added. Now I'm talking not about the synergy with the other two, but the mere fact that it is a vehicle for meeting. And by the way, we just had this 2 weeks ago in the Torah, and many people misunderstand it. The Torah says, "V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham." Let them make for me a holy place, and I will dwell among them. So the rabbinic comment is, "B'sochol lo nemar." It doesn't say I will dwell in it. It says I will dwell among them. B'socham, not among. It's sort of like he has his house and we have our houses, but b'soch means within. I will dwell within them. Right? Some people make the mistake of thinking the rabbinic comment means so he isn't in the mikdash. The mikdash is only a temple. It's only a building. Of course, he's not in the temple. Somehow it means if you build the temple, then he'll dwell in the hearts of in the heart of each one. No, that's wrong. What it means is, I'm telling you to build a holy place. And that holy place is supposed to be, so to speak, a dwelling place for God. But that's not the goal. The goal isn't that he should dwell there. The goal is that he should dwell there in order to dwell in their hearts. He does dwell there. He is there, so to speak. God isn't physical, so he can't be in any physical place. But something's there, and then because it's there, the effect is that he will dwell in the heart of every Jew.
Is it like, build me a cell phone tower and your phone will have reception? Kind of?
In a way, that's right, because the tower is the means by which you get reception. So in here, but your example is right in the sense of A is a means for B. But in your example, there's no, what we call a havamina, there's no thought that maybe the tower is for itself.
So,
Right? But here you could have thought, if God says, build me a mikdash, and in that mikdash I'm going to place my presence, maybe that's it. That's why he wants it. He wants his presence to be there. Maybe that's the end of the story. And here, that the rabbinic comments, it's telling you, the verse is pointing the finger to you and saying, no. The end of the story is not that his presence is there. The end of the story is that via its being there, it will be in the heart of every Jew, and that's what the goal is. The goal is that it should be in the heart of every Jew. So when it says b'socho lo ne'emar, when the rabbinic comment says, it doesn't say in it, it says among them, right? It doesn't mean that's wrong to say that it's in it. It's right, but it's not. That's not what the verse wants to tell you. It wants to tell you that via being in it, it will be in the hearts of every Jew. Yeah.
Is Shabbos fully explained, or all of its characteristics accounted for by calling it a olam haba in miniature?
No, not in detail. Not in detail.
In essence?
Well, in essence, it's a time. Well, all right. Let me say a few more words. I mean, I didn't say everything that obviously what there is to say. Shabbos. I spoke about preparing. You have to prepare before you get there for both of them, right? What I'm going to say now may be obvious on one side, but it needs to be put on the table given what you just asked. Shabbos is also the goal. Just like the world to come is the goal, the Mishnah describes our world as the entranceway to a great hall, and we're hanging up our coats in the coat room. That's all we're doing here. We're getting our tickets for the meal. We're getting the menu and so forth and so on before we walk into the great hall. So, and the same thing is true with the 6 days of the week. The whole goal of the 6 days of the week is to get to Shabbos. It's all preparation for Shabbos. The Gemara says that Shammai used to prepare for Shabbos like this. On Sunday, he would buy something for Shabbos. Piece of food, let's say. Some piece of food. Monday, he would go back to the market. He would find something better, and he would buy on Monday the better thing for Shabbos, and then eat on Monday the thing which he had bought on Shabbos, on Sunday for Shabbos. And so it would go day by day. He would pick out the best thing in the market that day and save it for Shabbos. We'd go the next day to look for something even better, and if he found something better, we keep the better one. And the Gemara says, comes out that he ate all week in honor of Shabbos. Because each day what he ate was the second best thing in the house, because I'm saving the best thing in the house for Shabbos. And he bought something every day. The Ramban points out, how do we designate the days of the week? No Sunday, no Monday, no Norse gods, no Roman gods over here. It's Yom Rishon b'Shabbos, Yom Sheni b'Shabbos, Yom Shlishi b'Shabbos. The designation of the days of the week carries a reference to Shabbos every day. So you live in terms of Shabbos. You're looking forward to Shabbos, and that's every week. So this idea of the goal is something which both Shabbos and the world to come have in common. So that's another feature. But now on Shabbos you have 39 categories of physical activity which are prohibited, and they are traced to the 39 types of physical creativity that was used to create the tabernacle. That's where we learned the prohibition from. I don't think you could get the details of the 39 from the idea that it's similar to the world to come. You can get the blanket cessation of creative physical labor because in neither place is there any creative physical labor. But how you would get the detailed articulation into the 39, I don't know if you could do that. What am I really saying? I don't know how to do it. That's what I'm really saying. So maybe there are others who've done it. I haven't searched all the literature, obviously. So I don't know if you could get all the details. There is a positive mitzvah for Shabbos, that Shabbos should be remembered. The Ramban says every morning when you say the Psalm of the day, and you say today is the third day of Shabbos, the fifth day of Shabbos, when you say those words, you are performing the mitzvah of remembering Shabbos. The Ramban, Nachmanides. After all, remember, you could remember something when it's present. You could become distracted and forget it. That could happen. But when it's not present, that's when all you have is memory. You don't have anything else because it's not there. And he says you're performing the biblical commandment of remembering the Shabbos when you say those words every day that you recite the Psalm of the day. So this idea of it being the goal, and of course the goal of the Jew is the world to come, about which maybe I'll say a few more words in a minute. So this another sense in which it's linked. It's an intermediary goal. Obviously, we call the world to come Yom Shekulo Shabbos, the day which is all Shabbos, not Shabbos with Sunday afterwards, and not Shabbos just in some respects, but Shabbos all respects. It's the ideal Shabbos, which then means that our Shabbos becomes that two-dimensional relationship to the world to come. On the one hand, as I said, like with the fish, when you get there, you look back and say, oh yeah, there was something like that in our world. But you have to be constantly reminded that it isn't the real thing. It's just something which could be a prelude. Sort of like the introduction into an opera where the orchestra plays alone, and some of the main tunes that you're going to hear in the opera are given to you, so that if you pay attention to the introduction later on and say, yeah, we heard that before. But it's not like hearing the whole opera. It's only an introduction. So that's the element of Shabbos. Now there's another thing which is deeper, which is also in L'cha Dodi. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. That which is last in action is first in thought. That which is last in action is first in thought. This could be like a riddle. What common category that you know in life all the time, what common category of experience should be described as last in action and first in thought? The answer is I mean things that happen over and over and over again. I don't mean one grand fact, which is a bit depressing. No, goals. Goals. Guy decides at the age of 19, freshman in college, what am I going to do with my life? I want to be a doctor. Let's say he decides in high school. It's even better in high school. Decided junior of high school. I want to be a doctor. His father's a doctor. Okay, so what do I do now? Well, let's see. To become a doctor, I've got to go to a medical school, hopefully a good medical school. Go to a good medical school, I've got to go to a college with a good pre-med program. I've got to get into a college with a good pre-med program. I better do some good science in high school. I better demonstrate the kind of character that's good for science, do extra credit products, join science fairs or science competitions, get good recommendations.
Be of the right minority.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But today it's easy, because you are what you declare, right? So I can be black, I can be Hispanic. You know about the furries? Oh, look at the furries. They're animals. They are animals. That's how they identify. Go tell them he's not a horse. Go tell him he's not a fox. Will he pay taxes when he grows up? Who knows? Foxes don't pay taxes. Look up the furries. I saw Ben Shapiro asking some woman who's talking about gender fluidity and so on and so on, why aren't you 60? I mean, if you're physically one way and you can identify, why can't you identify as 60 and be 60? The short answer is because 60 has a definition, and you know the definition doesn't apply. When you say that I identify as female and I'm a female because I say so, the word female has no content, has no definition. You get away with it because it has no meaning. Because anything that really has a meaning, I'm a stone, I'm a dog, no one's going to push that because it's clear that it isn't true. Here it's not clear that it isn't true because it has no meaning at all. Go define it. Define woman in the transgender sense where a person says, I identify as a woman, therefore I'm a woman. What does WOMAN mean? Try it. It's a good exercise. Anyway.
They changed the meaning of I, though, to mean something else.
That I didn't hear, unless because I is gender neutral and race neutral.
When they say I identify as a woman,
Yeah.
when they say I disagree with it as well, but they're not saying my physical characteristics are of a woman.
I don't mind what they're not saying. Tell me what they are saying. It can't be features. It can't be tastes and so on and so on. Because males can also enjoy knitting. Males can also enjoy conversation and so on and so on. And they don't have to identify as women to enjoy them. So that can't.
I emotionally feel a certain way. My social identity and my emotions are a certain way.
But couldn't someone who identifies as a man have those emotions?
What do you mean?
I mean exactly what I asked.
No,
those emotions.
The person who says I identify as a woman.
Right. And I'm asking what that means. You're telling me it means, the word WOMAN in that sentence means having these emotions and these feelings. So I ask,
Right.
Couldn't there be someone, biologically, whatever you like, he could be biologically a horse.
That's why they want to change the biology.
No, you're not listening. You're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. If you define woman, when she says, I identify as a woman, to mean having certain emotions, right? What you're saying is that someone who identifies as a man can't have those emotions because woman means having those emotions. So he can't have them as a man. And that's wrong. She wouldn't want to say that.
But it's not about having the emotions.
You just said it was. You're going to change it. Hold on.
Let me rephrase.
But hold on. The way you rephrased it before is wrong.
Correct.
Good.
Well, but a better way to phrase it would be, I would prefer to be viewed this way.
This way now avoids the word that we want that definition for. Which way?
Right. So the way they're defining the word woman.
Yeah.
This is why, for example, the whole MAGA changing the forms. This is why. So they like you said before with the word pleasure, referring to when Chazal say it.
Right.
It's built in a context in a system.
Right.
So what they basically need to do is every word that they change forces them to change another word, which forces them to change another word.
I don't mind it. Just tell me what's the end. What's the result? I want a meaning.
It's a new language.
I don't care if it's new English. If they say woman means butterflies, I'm happy with that. I don't mind.
Right.
But I don't think they can say anything. Because whatever they say, if they're going to define woman that way, it follows that if someone who identifies himself as a male can't have those characteristics because it means woman. And he said man. They're not accepting someone who's going to be both woman and man, right? That far they haven't gone, as far as I know. So that if they're going to define woman as having characteristics X, Y, Z, what they're saying is, if any other person says, I have characteristics X, Y, Z, that person is stuck with the title woman. And they don't believe that outcome. If they don't believe that outcome, it means the word woman in their mouths has no meaning at all. Sorry to do logic and philosophy, but that's what I was trained to do. And I didn't think up this point. I didn't think up this point. I heard it in, I forget the guy's name, but I think this is absolutely correct. So let me just finish the point about Shabbos, since we got off on a tangent here. So now, goals, the guy's going to medical school, so he traces back. Doctor, medical school, pre-med, a pre-med program, good grades in science in high school, right? Now, what does he do? Well, he's in high school. So first he does the good grades in science in high school, and then he gets a good pre-med medication, then he goes to medical school and becomes a doctor. So being a doctor is first in thought and last in action. He got into the whole scenario because he first thought, I want to be a doctor. Then he thought, how am I going to get there? And traces it back step by step, and then he goes through it and the last element in his action is the goal that he thought of first. That's, I think, a pretty obvious and nice definition of what it is to have a goal. But in our literature, it's taken a step further. And this applies to God's creation also. In our literature, it's taken a step further, which is also a characteristic of goals. Not only is it that that's what I thought of, and this is how I'm getting there, and first the thought, last in action, but the thought of the goal guides my action all the way. It guides my action all the way. So, if I'm going to talk about a good pre-med program, it's not just a question of having good science courses. It's a university that's identified as preparing future doctors, like Johns Hopkins, where I used to teach, and where all the applicants wanted to do English literature. Because they knew if they signed in, they wanted to be doctors, there'd be 1 in 10,000 applicants, and they wouldn't get in. So they had to pretend to be interested in English literature so they could get accepted, and then shift, right? Because they wanted a place that had a good pre-med reputation. As you're moving through, the thought of the goal guides your process of action all the way through. And the same thing is true with the creation. The creation is for the sake of arriving at a certain goal, and then that goal guides the way God structures and manages the creation all the way through. So this is another connection between Shabbos, the way we so the same thing is true with the way we look at Shabbos. What I do on Sunday has Shabbos in mind. Okay, this is the preparation that I'm doing today. Tomorrow I'll do that. Tomorrow I'll do that. And then it's the circumstances change. I wanted to get from A to B to C to D to E, but B doesn't get to C anymore. So I got to go around another corner because I want to get to E, which I want to get to Shabbos. The idea of Shabbos is guiding you the whole way through. You want to ask a question?
So in theory, the question is, to what extent should our decisions throughout the week be informed by Shabbos? In theory, every single decision could be, the criterion of Shabbos could be integrated into every single decision, and you might say that there aren't any neutral decisions for which you can't integrate Shabbos.
I'll tell you, I would say that theoretically that's true, but most of us are not enough aware, have enough calculation capacity to do that.
Is that ideal or even possible?
I think, I don't know. I don't know if it's possible because maybe all connections will be infinity of connections, and then it won't be possible. But for example, my example is a ballet dancer who's doing a jump. What does he have in mind? Well, one thing he has in mind is when I land, I better not break my ankle. He certainly has that in mind. But if he's good, he also has in mind the shape of his eyebrows, the tension in his fingers. The jump has to express something, joy or escape from danger or confusion. A good ballet dancer is thinking about every muscle in the body. He's trained to do that. Sometimes after a while it becomes naturally. If it's fear, he goes into a fear pose, and he knows what a fear pose is, and every muscle is planned. So now, most of us wouldn't be able to do that. We're not knowledgeable enough, we don't have enough self-control, but that's the goal. People, I was a musician for many years, and I still love classical music. And people make a mistake. They think that opera is music. Opera is drama. And the drama is very heavily informed by the music, but it's not just music. Why don't the soloists come out in evening clothes or casual clothes and just sing? Because it's drama. There's really a story being told, and the music has to emphasize and epitomize the drama that's being told.
Okay, so if, for example, if you're shaking a lulav in Sukkot, could you shake a lulav with Shabbos in mind?
What you have in mind is that it's not Shabbos, because if it were Shabbos, you wouldn't be shaking the lulav. I don't think that shaking the lulav, this is different now, because shaking the lulav on Tuesday is not preparation for Shabbos.
Okay.
So there can be
There
things
are decisions that are
Right.
that do not overlap with your criterion for being conscious of Shabbos.
Yeah, but see, for example, it's like, I'm gonna put it. It's like knowing you're in a context so that you can always check. Now, the check might be, as far as the context is concerned, this or an alternative is okay. It wouldn't make any difference. But let's suppose that your lulav became puzzle, and now you got to buy a new one, and you only have so much money. And if you buy a new one, you're going to be short for Shabbos. Then you have a conflict. You have something to think about. So Shabbos is always potentially there. It's always potentially there. But whether it would actually play a role in the decision, I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine that's the case, at least for ordinary people.
In one of the things that, let's say, a lot of the rabbis here talk about is that when you grow, you have to grow one step at a time and all that. So, should a person prioritize, say, his growth with regards to his observance of Shabbos? Should that be higher on the priority list than his growth over an activity he could do on Tuesday or an activity he could do on Monday? It's assuming he can, it's Yom Kippur and he's like, I can accept upon myself an extra mitzvah this year, an extra halacha this year. Should he prioritize Shabbos over something on Chol?
It's a very, very important question. Very important and very fundamental.
You repeat it?
I'm sorry? Repeat the question. Yeah, since Shabbos is so important, if a person thinking of taking a step forward in increasing his Jewish observance, should he prioritize Shabbos because of its importance over something else which would not be as important as Shabbos? The criterion for choosing your next step in assimilating the Jewish tradition is psychological. Not legal, but psychological. It can be, for example, that a person would have a choice between Shabbos on the one hand and blessings on the other hand. Blessings, except for one, are rabbinic. Shabbos is mentioned in the 10 pronouncements of Sinai and more than 15 times in the Torah. It's very essential. But Shabbos might be too much for him. Shabbos might break him. And blessings may be just the right step for the next step in his development. So no, we don't decide what the next step in development is on legal grounds, what's legally a more important mitzvah. That's not how we do it. We do it psychologically. We look in terms of the long-term benefit of the process and the project, so that 10 years from now, he will have achieved the maximum development that's possible for those 10 years. It's a very important idea. It's not obvious at all that it should be that way. I mean, it would be much more obvious if we had said, no, do it by legal priority. But here you have in mind the long-term outcome. And one reason for it is simply that no one fulfills the whole Torah perfectly. Ein Adam Tzaddik ba'aretz yasav lo yechta. And for the listeners on the recording, I said it correctly. The word Adam is there, even though it's never quoted. No one has a perfect record. No one has a perfect record. So then everybody's looking to improve. Everybody's looking to prepare. Everyone's looking to protect himself. And then the priorities have to be set. It's not this question of going for the top. It's taking account of where you are and how 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you can be in the best possible place, given where you are now and what your resources are. It's very, very important. Okay, have a wonderful Shabbos.